Chapter 71 True and Phantom Blood Sword. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Huang Jie saw this, there was no expression on her beautiful face. She was still watching with cold eyes. At the same time, her slender hands changed the seal method again, and then a deep voice suddenly sounded in her throat. Break! Boom! At this moment, the blood gold sword pillar burst out with dazzling light again, and the overflowing ferocious aura, mixed with a hint of sacred charm, faced the soul light blade. Boom! The two collided fiercely in mid-air, emitting an extremely dazzling light. The billowing energy fluctuation spread out like a strong wind, making every inch of the void make a whistling sound, as if it was about to shatter. After lasting for a moment, the soul light blade finally ran out of energy and dissipated in the void. The blood gold sword pillar is still suspended in mid-air, but its size has also shrunk a lot, and the aura it emits has also weakened a lot. Obviously, there was no benefit between the two in this round of collision. If we insist on digging into the details, we can only say that Bai Fei has a slight upper hand, just a little bit. Bai Fei was also a little surprised. He didn't expect Huang Jie's blood sword to be so resistant, but when I thought about it, it wasn't actually that big of a surprise. After all, the blood sword suspended in mid-air is made from the power of Huang Jie's bloodline, her magical weapon, and the blood sword 10,000 secrets. With the blessing of so many powers, it is naturally powerful. It is extremely powerful, so even if Bai Fei's soul-shattering light wanted to break the blood sword, it was indeed a bit reluctant. Seeing that his blood sword had been preserved, Huang Jie breathed a sigh of relief. What she was most worried about was that her blood sword would be broken. If that time really comes, it will really not be easy for him to deal with Bai Fei. At that moment, Huang Jie's eyes fell on Bai Fei's handsome face. A touch of pride appeared on her delicate and beautiful face. Then she opened her lips slightly and said to the former, junior brother Bai Fei, it looks like even if I am superior, you will still be defeated by me. Hearing Huang Jie's words, Bai Fei just smiled lightly, without any trace of panic on his handsome face, but said softly, Senior Sister Jade, don't talk too much. We are fighting now. It's not over yet, we still don't know who will win. Really? But you have already used your strongest method, but the result is that even my blood sword cannot break it. Do you really think you can turn defeat into victory? Huang Jie said calmly, or, do you have other trump cards? Senior Sister Jade, you are right. If it were before, this would indeed be my strongest trump card, but now. But that's not necessarily the case. Bai Fei was still smiling and talking, then he took a step forward, and then his heart moved slightly. The next second, an unparalleled aura spread over his body. Immediately afterwards, billowing bloody spiritual energy surged out of Bai Fei's body, converging at one point in the void, and once again formed a bloody spiritual sword more than 5 meters long. When Huang Jie saw this, a look of doubt appeared on her delicate and beautiful face. She didn't understand why Bai Fei summoned his blood sword again. It was obvious that his blood sword could no longer withstand his own attack. What is this intended to do? Humiliate me? Or give up resistance? Huang Jie didn't think Bai Fei was such a person, so why did he summon the bleeding sword again? Is it possible? Huang Jie thought of a possibility. The next second, the bloody sword above Bai Fei's head suddenly trembled, and then split into two. True phantom blood sword. Huang Jie's beautiful eyes suddenly widened, and she said in shock, have you practiced the 10,000 secrets of the blood sword to the 4th level? That's right, the 4th level of blood sword 10,000 secrets can condense a martial art like true fantasy blood sword. True phantom blood sword, as the name suggests, can condense 2 blood swords, one real and one fake, to confuse the opponent. This scene also surprised countless people. After all, how long has Bai Fei been an outer disciple? As a result, I have now reached the 4th level of blood sword 10,000 techniques. You must know that only by becoming an outer disciple can you be qualified to access the 3rd level of blood sword 10,000 secrets. How much talent do you need to be able to practice to the 4th level of blood sword 10,000 techniques so quickly? When Bai Fei heard this, he didn't answer, but just looked at Huang Jie with an indifferent expression. When Huang Jie saw that Bai Fei did not deny it, he just narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "I really didn't expect that your talent would be so strong. It's just that, even in this state, your spiritual energy should be almost exhausted, right?" Bai Fei was silent, but just as Huang Jie said, after all, realm is still his flaw, even if the quality of his spiritual energy is higher, high quality does not mean high quantity, therefore, what Bai Fei can do now is the only offensive move in front of him. Seeing that Bai Fei didn't speak, Huang Jie also shouted in a deep voice. The next second, the aura on her body exploded in vain, immediately. Afterwards, billowing spiritual energy surged out and injected into the blood gold sword pillar. The blood gold sword pillar also swayed slightly and split into two. At this time, Huang Jie also used the fourth level of blood sword 10,000 techniques, the true and false blood sword. She also wanted Bai Fei to choose how to deal with herself. After all, one is true and the other is false. If you choose the wrong one, it will be dangerous. However, for Bai Fei, there is no such worry, his body is very strong. "Come on, Bai Fei, choose," Huang Jie shouted delicately, and with a wave of her jade hand, the two blood gold sword pillars shot towards Bai Fei in unison. Looking at the blood gold sword pillars emitting surging energy and shooting towards him, Bai Fei's face did not have any worry. He just waved his palm lightly, and urged the two blood swords on his head to meet it. At that moment, one of the blood swords hit one of the blood gold sword pillars, and then that blood gold sword pillar broke into pieces. Obviously, Bai Fei's real blood sword hit the fake blood gold sword pillar. After the fake blood gold sword pillar was broken, the real blood sword also shot out, emitting a very strong aura, and shot towards Huang Jie. Huang Jie had already made sufficient preparations. Chapter 72, Better Than the Others. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Huang Jie was seen vibrating his golden wings, combining with his own spiritual energy to form a bloody wind blade. Boom! After the bloody wind blade and the real blood sword collided fiercely in mid-air, the bloody wind blade vibrated violently and then shattered. Huang Jie had already been mentally prepared. After all, the power of the true phantom blood sword triggered by the fourth level was naturally not comparable to that of the third level, so after the bloody wind blade was broken, Huang Jie raised his slender hand again, quickly formed a seal, and once again displayed a martial arts. Bloodlight sword and shield. The billowing blood-colored spiritual energy gathered in front of Huang Jie, blooming with a dazzling light, forming a blood-colored sword shield, which shimmered and blocked the impact of the blood sword. After shaking violently for a while, the bloody sword and shield finally shattered. However, at the same time that the bloody sword and shield shattered, the bloody sword also dissipated at the same time. At that moment, strong wind spread out, causing a strange howling sound. This made Huang Jie secretly relieved. At the same time, he also secretly thought, at this moment, Bai Fei must have been defeated by me, right? After all, this little time was enough for his attack to defeat Bai Fei. However, when Huang Jie raised her head and looked over again, the pupils of her eyes suddenly shrank, and an unconcealable look of horror appeared on her delicate and beautiful face. Even her lips opened wide, and she subconsciously screamed. How can this be? Yes, when Huang Jie looked at Bai Fei's side, he discovered that his blood gold sword pillar did not attack Bai Fei with a devastating attack, but instead, he was blocked by Bai Fei's blood sword. But, how is this possible? It is clear that Fei's real blood sword just shot towards him, so logically speaking, the other blood sword should be fake and would be easily broken by her blood gold sword pillar, thus bombarding Bai Fei. But what is the situation now? Unless twin blood swords. Huang Jie quickly thought of a possibility, which shocked her heart. Twin blood swords, a martial art derived from the fifth level of blood sword 10,000 secrets. As the name suggests, both blood swords are real and have powerful destructive power. But, how is this possible? Huang Jie has been practicing for several years and has only reached the fourth level of blood sword 10,000 secrets, but how long has this Bai Fei been an outer disciple? Less than a month, right? As a result, he cultivated the blood sword 10,000 secrets to the fifth level. Are you kidding me? How can anyone have such an incredible talent? Huang Jie didn't want to believe it. However, this is actually the case. What Bai Fei just performed was indeed not the reproductive martial arts of the 4th level of Blood Sword 10,000 Secrets, but the twin blood swords of the 5th level. You know, Bai Fei's qualifications are now the Youth King. What he cultivates is naturally very fast. Bang! Finally, the blood gold sword pillar in the void could no longer bear it, and cracks appeared on the surface and broke apart. After all, Huang Jie no longer has any more power that can be injected into the blood gold sword pillar to maintain the power of the blood gold sword pillar. This is Bai Fei's strategy. After the blood gold sword pillar was broken, the main body's spiritual sword also flew out and stabbed diagonally into the ground. Bai Fei's blood sword shot out at lightning speed and directly hit Huang Jie. Huang Jie reacted immediately, and the spiritual energy gathered in front of him, and he used the blood light sword and shield again. Boom! The blood sword bombarded the blood sword shield, and the blood sword shield shattered after holding on for 2 seconds. Immediately afterwards, Huang Jie's body was hit by the blood sword, and like a broken scarecrow, he flew upside down and fell out of the ring. In the end, Bai Fei was stronger and defeated Huang Jie. This scene also caused an uproar from everyone in the audience. No one expected that Bai Fei actually defeated Huang Jie. That's the 3rd-ranked genius from the outer sect. As a result, he was defeated by Bai Fei. Isn't this too shocking? This Bai Fei is actually so strong. His talent is truly terrifying. I really should have tried harder back then. That even Lin Tingtao couldn't help but sigh when he saw this situation, and felt very regretful in his heart. Why didn't he persist in the first place? If he persists, he might be able to get Bai Fei to become his disciple, and then he will be able to get better resources and treatment through Bai Fei. It's such a pity. However, those present, whether they are disciples or elders and other senior officials, they all know very well that Bai Fei is now unstoppable. This is the real dark horse. After Huang Jie fell out of the ring, Bai Fei finally breathed a sigh of relief. There is not much spiritual energy left in his body. If he can no longer defeat Huang Jie, he will have to use his strongest means. If possible, he still hopes to hide his last trump card, because he still needs to deal with another person. After defeating Huang Jie, Bai Fei bowed to her, bowed slightly, and said, "Thank you, senior sister Jie." Although Huang Jie was injured, it was not serious. She struggled to get up from the ground and looked at Bai Fei. A complex expression appeared in her beautiful eyes. Finally, she sighed in her heart and said to Bai Fei, "I am convinced that I lost to you." After saying this, Huang Jie turned and walked into the crowd. Seeing this, Bai Fei was secretly relieved. After all, every disciple has 3 chances. If Huang Jie came up to challenge again, it would be difficult. Fortunately, Huang Jie did not come up to challenge again, which was the best thing for Bai Fei. At that moment, Bai Fei sat cross-legged, took out a pill from the storage ring, threw it into his mouth, and began to recover. At this time, no one dared to challenge on stage. After all, if you really want a challenge like this, no matter you win or lose, you will be called shameless. What's more, even if you really win, you may not be able to keep this ranking. The competition is still going on, but basically, the top 10 rankings are fixed, and there is no fluctuation. Huang Jie also recovered from his injuries and challenged others again, finally succeeded and won the 4th place. Chapter 73, Challenge for the 1st place. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The outer sect genius who was originally ranked 4th was of course not convinced, and challenged Huang Jie again. Unfortunately, he still failed. In the end, Huang Jie's ranking was fixed at 4th place, and no one challenged him again. Time passed bit by bit. Soon, it was afternoon. There was still some time before the end of the outer sect ranking battle. At this time, Bai Fei, who was guarding the ring, saw that no one challenged him, so he opened his eyes and stood up from the ground. Seeing Bai Fei stand up from the ring, everyone present was confused. They didn't understand what Bai Fei wanted to do. Then, they saw Bai Fei walk down from the ring and walk in another direction. This surprised countless people present. What does Bai Fei want to do? Could it be, he wants to challenge Song Zhe? Is he not satisfied with the 3rd place? Song Zhe is the 2nd outer sect genius. At this moment, he saw that Bai Fei was indeed walking towards him, which made him a little nervous. After all, Song Zhe's strength was not much different from Huang Jie. however, Song Zhe was really reluctant to face Bai Fei, because Song Zhe had a feeling in his heart that Bai Fei, who had just fought with Huang Jie, must not have shown all his strength. If it was really all his strength, where would he get the confidence to continue the challenge? So, Song Zhe was really panicked. However, Bai Fei had already arrived in front of Song Zhe's ring at this time. This made Song Zhe's heart rise to his throat. However, Bai Fei did not go to Song Zhe's ring, but continued to move forward. Behind Song Zhe, there was only one ring, and on that ring, there was only one person. That person was the first prodigy of the outer sect, Lu Liwen. So, when everyone present saw that Bai Fei was heading to Lu Liwen's ring, they were all shocked. No way. What did I see? Am I dreaming? Is there something wrong with my eyes? He wants to challenge Lu Liwen. Is he crazy? That at this moment, everyone's emotions became very different. Some people mocked, some were shocked, and some were curious. No one thought that Bai Fei would still want to challenge Lu Liwen. That's Lu Liwen, one of the 10 great outer sect geniuses. Besides the second place, there have always been people rotating the rankings, only Lu Liwen. He has been the first for 5 consecutive years. You can imagine how terrifying his strength is. More importantly, his current cultivation has already reached the great perfection of the gathering spirit realm. What about Bai Fei? He is only at the 9th level of the refining body realm, and he wants to fight with Lu Liwen, who is at the great perfection of the gathering spirit realm. Isn't this a fight between an egg and a stone? At this time, Bai Fei has already stepped onto the ring. On the ring, Lu Liwen sat cross-legged, dressed in white, and was very elegant. He didn't open his eyes. He had already sensed Bai Fei's arrival. He slowly opened his mouth and said, "You shouldn't have challenged me. You will end up miserable." Hearing this, Bai Fei just smiled faintly and said, "You have to give it a try. You will die if you try, don't you know this sentence?" Lu Liwen slowly opened his eyes, stood up from the ground, and said faintly, "Well, since you want to die so much, I will fulfill your wish. After all, you killed Zhou Yulin, I have to avenge him anyway." Lu Liwen's words made Bai Fei's face without any fluctuations. He just said indifferently, "Then you can give it a try." Bai Fei had already known that Lu Liwen and Zhou Yulin were good friends. Not only friends, they were also brothers. That's right, Lu Liwen was also Jian Zhongjie's apprentice. Bai Fei wanted to challenge Lu Liwen for this reason. He knew very well in his heart that Lu Liwen had his own dignity and would not condescend to challenge Bai Fei. However, once the outer gate ranking battle was over, Lu Liwen would definitely deal with him secretly. At that time, it would not be a simple matter for Bai Fei to survive, because Lu Liwen had already won the reward of the outer gate ranking battle at that time. He would definitely impact the Danyuan realm. Once Lu Liwen broke through to the Danyuan realm, Bai Fei would definitely not be his opponent. Therefore, the best way is to defeat Lu Liwen in the outer gate ranking battle. In this way, Lu Liwen will not become a threat to himself. Hearing Bai Fei's words, Lu Liwen said coldly, "You are very confident. But sometimes confidence will only lead you to the abyss." As these words fell, an extremely terrifying aura burst out from Lu Liwen, the great perfection of the dueling realm. This kind of cultivation burst out from Lu Liwen's body, directly causing strong winds to automatically form around him and spread out. Feeling the powerful pressure emanating from Lu Liwen, Bai Fei's face did not show any fluctuations in expression. He just clenched his palms slightly, and then burst out with a strong momentum, the 9th level of the physical training realm. It must be said that the difference between the two is really too big. This made countless people feel weird after seeing it, but Bai Fei was able to resist Lu Liwen's momentum, which made people feel even more unreal. Shua, seeing that Bai Fei had resisted his momentum, Lu Liwen narrowed his eyes, moved his feet slightly, and a sound of breaking through the air suddenly sounded. The next second, Lu Liwen disappeared from the spot. Then, Lu Liwen appeared in front of Bai Fei, slapped his palms suddenly, and rolling spiritual energy rushed out, exuding a terrible might, bombarding Bai Fei. Bai Fei's pupils shrank, and his heart was shaken. It must be said that Lu Liwen's speed was really fast enough. When Bai Fei came to his senses, his attack had already arrived in front of him. Seeing this, Bai Fei did not hesitate at all. He shouted in his mouth, raised his fist, burst out his own spiritual energy, and went up. Bang! Fists collided, energy exploded. At that moment, Bai Fei's body was blown back, and his feet stepped on the ground, causing it to crack inch by inch. Lu Liwen did not retreat at all, and stood firmly in place. Only Bai Fei, his body was shaken back more than 10 meters before stopping. In the first round of the fight, Bai Fei was at a disadvantage, but for Lu Liwen, this made him frown slightly, because he didn't want to see such a result. Chapter 74, Fierce Battle. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After all, Lu Liwen was a great master of the gathering spirit realm. He knew that Bai Fei was very strong, so he went all out in his attack without any mercy. According to Lu Liwen's expectation, even if Bai Fei could not be seriously injured by his attack, he should have suffered serious injuries. What was the result? Bai Fei was only repelled for a distance, and the surface of his body was at most scratched. Such injuries can be said to be negligible, so this is why Lu Liwen was unhappy. He is a warrior who has reached the great perfection of the gathering spirit realm and the first pride of the blood sword sect's outer sect. What about the other party? He is just a small body refining realm. Under normal circumstances, it is as simple as crushing an ant, but now it is just to repel his body, which is incredible. Bai Fei also felt that his physical body, combined with the spiritual energy, can withstand Lu Liwen's attack. This is good news for Bai Fei. At that moment, Bai Fei's eyes fell on Lu Liwen's face with a displeased look, and he smiled faintly and said, "It seems that the first genius of the outer sect is just so. Bai Fei's tone was full of mockery, which made Lu Liwen feel very unhappy. He was just a small body refining realm, and he dared to laugh at him. Did he really think that he was invincible after defeating Huang Jie? You are annoying," Lu Liwen said with a cold look in his eyes, "and those who can make me hate him will disappear from this world." After the voice fell, Lu Liwen suddenly raised his palm and pinched the seal with one hand. Then, a surge of momentum broke out from his body. The powerful blood-colored spiritual energy surged out and quickly gathered on his head, forming a blood-colored sword column. The blood-colored sword column split into two at this moment, emitting an extremely terrifying energy aura, and shot towards Bai Fei. Twin blood swords. Although Lu Liwen looked down on Bai Fei on the surface, he had to admit that Bai Fei did have some skills. Therefore, when Lu Liwen attacked again, his offensive was also very powerful, and he directly used the martial arts twin blood swords derived from the 5th level of blood sword 10,000 tricks. Lu Liwen was not like Huang Jie. The twin blood swords he displayed had an extremely terrifying momentum, and its speed was also extremely fast. Shua appeared in front of Bai Fei and slammed Bai Fei fiercely. Seeing this, Bai Fei also quickly urged blood sword 10,000 tricks and displayed twin blood swords to meet him. Suddenly, a series of blood-colored sword lights collided fiercely in the void. However, Lu Liwen's cultivation of blood sword 10,000 tricks was obviously more profound than Bai Fei, so the twin blood swords he released were much stronger than Bai Fei's in terms of power and quality. Because of this, Bai Fei's twin blood swords were hit so hard that cracks appeared on the surface, and they could break at any time. This is the difference in strength between the two. Bai Fei knew very well in his heart that Lu Liwen was very strong, but he never thought that he would be so strong. Bai Fei's twin blood swords could hardly compete with Lu Liwen's twin blood swords, so they were finally broken. However, although Lu Liwen's twin blood swords broke Bai Fei's twin blood swords, they also consumed a lot of energy, so Bai Fei was able to resist it with his own physical strength. Bang! Looking at the blood swords shooting towards him, Bai Fei clenched his palms, and his fists blasted out, breaking them directly. After repeating this, Bai Fei still stayed on the ring. Of course, in this way, it was only the spiritual energy in Bai Fei's body that was consumed. This was simply a shame for Lu Liwen. Therefore, Lu Liwen decided not to waste time and directly use his powerful killer move. Buzz! A sword sound resounded in the void, and then a spirit sword appeared in Lu Liwen's palm, and then he swung it out, bursting out an extremely terrifying force, and swung it forward. Dragon Roar Blood Sword. Roar! At that moment, a blood-colored sword light shot out from the spirit sword in Lu Liwen's hand. At the moment of the burst, a roar was also heard. This roar sounded like a dragon's roar. The dragon drinking blood sword is the unique skill of the blood sword sect, and it is a 3rd grade yellow level, extremely powerful. Seeing this, Bai Fei also had a solemn expression on his face, and then he took a step forward, and then a low voice slowly sounded in his throat. Soul-breaking light slash. Boom! At that moment, a soul light blade shot out under Bai Fei's urging, facing the blood-colored sword light. Bang! The two energy bodies collided fiercely in the void, bursting out dazzling light. The rolling energy waves raged again, then, the soul light blade and the blood-colored sword light that collided in the void gradually dissipated in the void. This was a stalemate, and it completely dissipated. It must be said that this was really incredible for the scene. After all, they had never expected that Bai Fei could actually resist Lu Liwen's dragon-drinking blood sword. Seeing this, Lu Liwen did not show any surprise on his face, and remained calm. Then he raised the spiritual sword in his hand again, urged the rolling spiritual energy again, and continued to perform a dragon-drinking blood sword. Seeing this, Bai Fei's expression changed drastically, and he gritted his teeth and performed the soul-breaking light/soul technique again. Bang! The white light blade and the blood-colored sword light once again collided fiercely in mid-air, flashing a dazzling light. The entire sky above the arena was shrouded in white light and blood light, which looked particularly beautiful. Of course, everyone present knew very well how terrifying the hidden danger was under this beautiful scene. Seeing that Bai Fei once again resisted Lu Liwen's attack, many disciples were amazed. Bai Fei is just a small warrior at the 9th level of the body refining realm, and what about Lu Liwen? He has already broken through to the great perfection of the gathering spirit realm. There is a huge gap between the two. As a result, they can fight back and forth, which is incredible. But in fact, more people can see the real situation in front of them. Chapter 75. What is this? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Because they know that on the surface, it seems that Bai Fei and Lu Liwen are evenly matched, but what about in reality? Bai Fei is at a disadvantage. Why is that? Because of the realm between the two. It is true that the quality of the spiritual energy cultivated by Bai Fei is higher, but don't forget that the skills cultivated by Lu Liwen are the same as Bai Fei, both of which are the Blood Sword 10,000 Secrets of the Blood Sword sect, and both have reached the 5th level. Even if there are some subtle differences between them due to their understanding of the skills, they are not many. The most important thing is that Bai Fei's realm is too low. If it weren't for Bai Fei's current physical body being too strong, he would have been defeated long ago. Just relying on the amount of spiritual energy, Lu Liwen can completely suppress it. Bai Fei is going to lose. Indeed, he now looks like he has run out of spiritual energy. After all, the gap in realm is there, and it is difficult to cross. On the high platform, countless high-level outer sects were discussing. Of course, they knew very well that it was already amazing for someone like Bai Fei to be able to achieve such a level. He was facing Lu Liwen, the #1 genius in the outer sect. And he had been ranked first in the outer sect battle list for 5 consecutive years. In these 5 years, basically no one dared to challenge him. Bai Fei was able to fight with Lu Liwen for such a long time without losing. In a sense, Bai Fei was actually very strong. After all, if Lu Liwen was at the same level as Bai Fei might really be able to defeat the former. However, all this was just if. On another stage, Huang Jie saw this scene and couldn't help but narrow her beautiful eyes, muttering, "Junior brother Bai Fei, even you can't beat him." In the distance of the martial arts training ground, on a loft, there was a slender figure standing. He put his hands behind his back and looked at the stage where Bai Fei and Lu Liwen were. The owner of this slender figure is Bailey Changyue. Although Bailey Qingyun was unwilling to let him participate in the outer sect ranking battle, he did not restrict him from watching, so, after Bailey Changyue finished his work, he came here. He really wanted to see what was so special about Meng Yuehang's disciple. After seeing this, Bailey Changyue also said to himself, "Bai Fei, I guess you should have other means, right? Use them. If you can't even defeat Lu Liwen, then you are indeed not qualified to be my opponent." On the ring, Lu Liwen looked at Bai Fei, who was already panting, and a contemptuous smile appeared on his face, and then slowly opened his mouth and said, "Bai Fei, you are already very difficult to compete with, right? How many more times can you use your soul technique now? Twice? Or once? After all, your soul power will be exhausted, right? But in front of me, even if you have exhausted your soul power, you can't exhaust my spiritual energy. At that time, what can you use to fight me? Lu Liwen's words did not make any expression on Bai Fei's face, because he knew very well in his heart that what Lu Liwen said was indeed correct. His soul power is almost exhausted now, and he can release soul-breaking light slash at most once more, but now Lu Liwen relies on his own realm to be higher than himself, and his spiritual energy is still very majestic. So the number of times he can perform martial arts is definitely much more than himself. Seeing Lu Liwen so proud, Bai Fei couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth slightly, outlining a faint smile, and even shook his head, seeing that Bai Fei could still laugh at this critical moment. Not worried at all, Lu Liwen said coldly, "What are you laughing at?" Lu Liwen wondered if Bai Fei had any other means. However, he thought it should be impossible. After all, the rules of the outer sect ranking battle have clearly stated that during the competition, you cannot use elixirs to restore your own spiritual energy, otherwise it will be regarded as a violation and the results will be cancelled. Now Bai Fei wants to restore his own spiritual energy, and he can only take elixirs, but the rules do not allow it. Therefore, Lu Liwen couldn't figure out why Bai Fei was so calm now. Hearing Lu Liwen's question, Bai Fei just smiled lightly and said, "I just think you are too weak." "I am weak?" Lu Liwen found it funny when he heard this. "Isn't it? You are a master of the great perfection of the gathering spirit realm, but you fought with me, a warrior of the 9th level of the refining body realm, for such a long time. Not only did you fail to defeat me, but you also fought me evenly. Don't you think you are ridiculous and weak? You just rely on your own cultivation to be higher than mine. If you are at the same level. Haha, who do you think you are?" At the end, Bai Fei's tone was full of sarcasm. After hearing this, Lu Liwen's face turned extremely ugly. However, even Lu Liwen had to admit that what Bai Fei said was indeed correct. If it weren't for the fact that Lu Liwen's own cultivation was much higher than Bai Fei's, Lu Liwen would never have won against Bai Fei. It was precisely because Bai Fei's words made sense that Lu Liwen's face became even uglier. At that moment, Lu Liwen said in a cold tone, "So what? The person who finally wrote the victory is me." Boom! At this moment, Lu Liwen burst out with an extremely terrifying momentum. Then, Lu Liwen swung his palm, and the spirit sword shot out from his palm, suspended in the air, and rotated rapidly. "I want to let you know that the first place in the outer sect is not something that anyone can touch." When this voice sounded, Lu Liwen's hands also quickly formed seals. As Lu Liwen's handprints appeared between his palms, the majestic spiritual energy on his body surged out and poured into the spiritual sword spinning above his head. Under the infusion of rolling spiritual energy, the spiritual sword suspended in the void burst into a blazing blood-red light. A sword that supports the sky. The next second, Lu Liwen opened his eyes wide and shouted coldly. Chapter 76 Well Deserved. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With this cold shout, the spirit sword in the air was wrapped by countless spirit energy, forming a sword pillar, shining brightly, exuding an unparalleled aura, as if it was going to split the sky. Seeing that Lu Liwen actually performed such a martial art, countless people present widened their eyes, full of horror. What? It's the sky sword. Is Lu Liwen crazy? He actually used the sky sword on Bai Fei. He is really angry. This Bai Fei is going to be unlucky. Huang Jie frowned slightly, a trace of worry appeared in her beautiful eyes, and whispered to herself, "This Lu Liwen is really crazy." Sky sword is a martial art ranked in the 3rd grade of the earth level, and it is one of the strongest martial arts in the outer sect of the blood sword sect. This is also Lu Liwen's strongest unique skill. At the beginning, Lu Liwen relied on this martial art to establish his position as the number 1 in the outer sect. And it was also with this martial art that he defeated an inner sect disciple of the 1st level of Danyuan realm, thus gaining a lot of attention. However, Bai Fei was only a martial artist of the 9th level of the body refining realm. Even if he could challenge a higher level, he could not change this fact. If Bai Fei was really hit by Lu Liwen's sky-lifting sword, even if he didn't die, he would be seriously injured, and there might even be worse consequences. This is why many people think that Lu Liwen is very crazy. After all, the competition between fellow disciples should not be so cruel. What's more, Bai Fei is now at the point of exhaustion. Lu Liwen also used his strongest martial art, which was too shameless, of course, for Luliwen. He didn't care how others viewed him. He knew very well in his heart that if Bai Fei was not dealt with at this point in time, he would no longer be able to control him after he grew up. Moreover, Bai Fei and Zhou Yulin still had a deep hatred, so today's grudge would inevitably be formed. Therefore, if he could be killed, it would be the best thing. Even if there was no way to kill him, at least he had to be disabled so that he would no longer pose any threat. After thinking about this, Luliwen shouted coldly, "Bai Fei, fall down." As the voice fell, Luliwen moved his mind, and the blood-colored sword column in the sky shot out violently, flowing with a majestic and unparalleled breath, shooting obliquely towards Bai Fei. At that moment, Bai Fei felt as if a blood-colored mountain fell from the sky and pressed down on him. The surrounding void made a crackling sound, as if it could not withstand the arrival of the blood-colored mountain. It must be said that this did surprise Bai Fei. He really did not expect that Luliwen actually had such a powerful martial art, but it doesn't matter. You have a trump card, but I don't have one. So, Bai Fei slowly raised his head and looked at the blood-red sword column that was slanting down from the sky. His face remained calm, and then a voice slowly rang out in his heart. Giant elephant steps on the mountain, start. Boom, that the earth-shaking sound resounded on the ring. The blood-red sword column suppressed it and burst out a terrifying energy fluctuation, along with the dazzling blood-red light. Rolling dust and smoke swept out and spread in all directions. At this moment, the disciples watching the battle were all shaken back by the strong wind that spread out. Even some disciples with weaker cultivation were slightly injured because of this, and blood was overflowing from the corners of their mouths. It was because the power of the sky-lifting sword displayed by Luliwen was too terrifying. The booming sound continued, the rolling dust rolled on the ring, everyone's eyes fell on the ring, and various emotions emerged. Unfortunately, ridicule, for many disciples, Bai Fei is really powerful, and he can fight with Luliwen to this extent. Of course, for some disciples, Bai Fei is just overestimating his own ability and actually trying to shake the throne of the first in the outer sect. After a long time, in the rolling dust, a light golden light suddenly bloomed. This made countless people present see this scene, and they were all stunned. What is that? Why is it glowing? What's the situation? Could it be? Is Bai Fei not defeated yet? At this moment, everyone had an expression of unwillingness to believe on their faces. Even Luliwen, who was originally full of smug smiles, saw the golden light surging out of the thick dust and smoke, and he had an ominous premonition in his heart. No, it's impossible. Luliwen didn't want to believe that Bai Fei could be intact under his martial arts attack just now, but at this time, Luliwen suddenly thought of a problem. If Bai Fei was really defeated by him, then according to reason, as a medium for releasing martial arts, shouldn't his spiritual sword return to his side? But now, he didn't feel his spiritual sword. Why? At this time, the dust and smoke had gradually dissipated. Then, a figure suddenly appeared. It was none other than Bai Fei. His palm was holding a spiritual sword, which kept struggling in the void, trying to escape, but was held by Bai Fei and couldn't break free at all. That was Luliwen's spiritual sword. What? When Luliwen saw that Bai Fei was really not injured, his eyes widened and he shouted in horror, "How is this possible?" The countless people present were also shocked and stunned. Bai Fei held Luliwen's spiritual sword in his hand, smiled faintly, and swung his palm, throwing Luliwen's spiritual sword out and letting it stick into the ground. Then, Bai Fei said to Luliwen, "It's my turn to go back and forth." As the words fell, Bai Fei took a step forward, then clenched his hands and blasted forward. Giant elephant steps on the mountain. Boom! A vast momentum burst out from Bai Fei's body, and at the same time, a giant elephant phantom appeared behind him. Chapter 77, Great Perfection of the Body Refining Realm. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With the appearance of the giant elephant's phantom, Bai Fei appeared in front of Luliwen like a world-class overlord, and punched him fiercely. Luliwen's face changed drastically, and he screamed in shock. Then, rolling spiritual energy rushed out of his body, turning into a blood-red sword, and rushed towards Bai Fei's fist. Bang! The two collided in the void. The next second, the blood-red sword was broken into pieces. Bai Fei's fist, with a devastating posture, hit Luliwen's body fiercely like a giant elephant. Puff. Lu Liwen's body was hit directly, and a mouthful of red blood spurted out of his lips. At the same time, a huge force also penetrated his limbs and bones. The whole body flew backwards like a broken scarecrow, fell out of the ring, and hit the ground heavily. At that moment, the whole audience was silent. Everyone present, no matter who they were, looked at Bai Fei with shock. Dong. At this moment, a bell sounded in the sky, then, the names of the outer sect ranking list in the sky were completely fixed, and the name on the first place was Bai Fei. But everyone here knew very well that Bai Fei, the real first place. No one thought that Bai Fei, a small 9th-level body refinement realm, would become a dark horse and break the inherent record of the outer sect ranking battle. What's more, he defeated Lu Liwen and won the first place. This kind of thing, it still makes everyone shocked and stunned. It's really because it's too dreamy. On the attic, Bailey Changhua saw this scene, and a faint smile appeared on his face involuntarily, and he said softly, "Very good, Bai Fei, I'll wait for you in the inner sect. I hope that by that time, your strength can be improved. I look forward to fighting with you." After saying this, Bailey Changhua turned around and left here. The outer sect ranking battle is over. Bai Fei defeated Lu Liwen and won the first place, which surprised the entire Blood Sword sect, both the outer sect and the inner sect. They originally thought that the outer sect ranking battle would be won by the same people as before. They never thought that a dark horse like Bai Fei would appear. He even defeated Lu Liwen, which is really unbelievable. This incident also made the entire Blood Sword sect excited. Many disciples even wanted to make friends with Bai Fei. It was a pity that after Bai Fei received the reward for the outer sect ranking battle, he had already returned to his cave and was in seclusion. Finally got the reward. Bai Fei opened a treasure box with great excitement. In the treasure box, there was a crystal clear pill, which exuded a strong and pure energy. That was the reward for winning the first place in this outer sect ranking battle, Ling Yuan Dan. Without any hesitation, Bai Fei threw Ling Yuan Dan into his mouth and began to practice Blood Sword 10,000 secrets to digest and practice. At this moment, the rolling medicinal power turned into a thick and pure energy that spread to Bai Fei's limbs and bones, and began to be refined and absorbed continuously. As the medicinal power of Ling Yuan Dan was exerted, Bai Fei's body also made a crackling sound. It was as if there were chains breaking apart, and when these crackling sounds rang out, Bai Fei's momentum continued to break through the 10th level of the body refining realm, the 11th level of the body refining realm, the 12th level of the body refining realm, until the great perfection of the body refining realm. The surging aura on his body finally stabilized. Bai Fei slowly opened his eyes, exhaled gently, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Finally I have reached the great perfection of the body refining realm. It's a pity that I couldn't reach the gathering spirit realm. After muttering to himself, Bai Fei's eyes also showed regret, but soon, Bai Fei recovered his composure. After all, he also knew that with his current physical condition, it was not so easy to break through to the gathering spirit realm. One Lingyuan pill is enough for a warrior to break through to the Danyuan realm. The result for Bai Fei to use, it was just a breakthrough to the great perfection of the body refining realm. In a sense, the energy Bai Fei needed was too huge. This was mainly because Bai Fei's body was too strong, so a lot of the medicine power was taken away. Of course, the most important thing was that Bai Fei had the blood of the giant elephant stepping on the mountain. The stronger the blood, the more energy it would consume. If Bai Fei still had the ordinary blood before, then he could indeed break through to the gathering spirit realm now. But after having the giant elephant stepping mountain bloodline, a lot of the medicinal power of Lingyuan Dan was integrated into the bloodline, increasing the power of the bloodline. At this moment, Bai Fei's heart moved, and he opened his system panel. Name, Bai Fei. Cultivation qualification, Young King. Birth bloodline, giant elephant stepping mountain bloodline. Spiritual cultivation realm, great perfection of body refining realm. Body refining realm, 12th level of blood tempering. Soul tempering realm, 11th level of perception. Current points, 3,360. Current items, soul quenching pill ×1, blood exploding pill ×1. The physical body has already reached the 12th level of blood tempering. It seems that it will be able to break through to the black iron body soon. Looking at the content displayed on the information panel, Bai Fei squinted his eyes and murmured, when his physical body breaks through to the black iron body, he will no longer be afraid of masters in the Danyuan realm. At that time, he can have a good showdown with the masters of Danyuan realm. At that moment, Bai Fei stood up, left the room, and went to look for Ma Quan. Brother Ma, that when Ma Quan saw Bai Fei appear, a faint smile appeared on his face and he said, "Are you out of seclusion? Kindness. How's it going? Is there a breakthrough?" Ma Quan asked curiously, because he knew that Bai Fei's reward was a Ling Yuan Dan. If you have Ling Yuan Dan, you can break through to the late stage of the spirit gathering realm, right? Well, a breakthrough. When Bai Fei heard this, he nodded, to reach the great perfection of the body refining realm. Have you just reached the great perfection of the body refining realm? Bai Fei's answer made Ma Quan startled. A Ling Yuan pill only allowed you to break through to the great perfection of the body refining realm. You didn't even succeed in breaking through to the spirit gathering realm. Isn't it? Are you kidding me? How could I joke with you? What I said is all true. Bai Fei smiled and shook his head, and then he took out a spiritual sword from the storage ring. Chapter 78, Plan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This spiritual sword was the reward Bai Fei received in the outer sect ranking battle, and it was a third-grade magic weapon. He handed the spiritual sword to Ma Quan and said, "Brother Ma, this is for you." This is. Ma Quan looked at the spiritual sword in front of him and said in surprise, "Is this the reward you received in the outer sect ranking battle?" Bai Fei nodded, "Yes." "No, it's too expensive, I can't accept it." Ma Quan heard this and shook his head and refused. After all, this was Bai Fei's reward, and it was a third-grade magic weapon, which was too expensive for him. When Bai Fei heard what Ma Quan said, he immediately felt at a loss whether to laugh or cry. "Brother Ma, what are you talking about? It's just a third-grade magic weapon. What's so valuable about it? Besides, I already have a magic weapon, so this magic weapon doesn't have much use for me. Besides, Brother Ma, only if you become stronger, you can help me if I need your help in the future, right? Besides, don't you still lack a magic weapon?" Ma Quan was slightly startled by Bai Fei's explanation. Ma Quan knew that Bai Fei's explanation was actually to make himself more legitimate to accept his gift and make him feel more at ease, but he had to admit that what Bai Fei said was indeed very reasonable. After all, Ma Quan was indeed still lacking a magic weapon to cooperate with his battle. This touched Ma Quan's heart. He was moved and didn't hesitate to take the third-grade spiritual sword from Bai Fei. He nodded to Bai Fei and said, "Thank you, Bai Fei." "Brother Ma, don't say that. If it weren't for you, I would have been driven out of the blood sword sect. I might have become a corpse and been eaten by wild dogs. If you want to say thank you, I should say thank you." Bai Fei just smiled, waved his hand, and answered. Ma Quan smiled at him when he heard this, then put away the magic weapon and asked, "What are your plans next?" "I plan to apply for the assessment task of becoming an inner disciple." Bai Fei answered. "Are you going to do the assessment task of an inner disciple?" Bai Fei's words made Ma Quan's face full of surprise. To be honest, Bai Fei's plan was really unexpected by Ma Quan. "Won't you consider it first?" Looking at Bai Fei, Ma Quan said, "It's not so easy to enter the inner sect, not to mention that you have just become the first in the outer sect. If you consolidate your position, you will get a lot of training resources later. There is no need to go to the inner sect now, right?" "Brother Ma, you are right, but this path is not suitable for me." Bai Fei just shook his head gently after hearing this, and said, "What I need now is to get the follow-up of Blood Sword 10,000 Secrets as soon as possible. After all, if there is no follow-up of Blood Sword 10,000 Secrets, it will be difficult for me to improve my strength again. You should also know that if you want to practice the 6th level of Blood Sword 10,000 Secrets, you can only be qualified if you become an inner sect disciple." "You are right." Bai Fei's words made Ma Quan think about it and felt that it made sense. At that moment, Ma Quan said to Bai Fei, "If that's the case, then go ahead, but before you go, you have to go find Elder Meng first." He seems to have something to say to you. Master, when Bai Fei heard this, a puzzled look appeared on his face, but he didn't say much, just nodded to Ma Quan, and then left his room. Bai Fei first went to Meng Yueheng's room to take a look. If he wasn't there, then he would go to the 9-story pass tower to find him. After all, there weren't many places Meng Yueheng could go, just a few, and Bai Fei was already familiar with them. When Bai Fei came to Meng Yueheng's room, he found that there was a bright light inside, which made his face look surprised. Master is actually in the room today. At that moment, Bai Fei walked to the door and knocked gently on the door. Dong dong. Come in. When Bai Fei walked into the room, he saw Meng Yueheng sitting cross-legged on the stone platform, closing his eyes and resting. Master. Bai Fei called out. Meng Yueheng opened his eyes, glanced at Bai Fei, nodded slightly, and said, "The great perfection of the body refining realm is not bad." Bai Fei was also a little surprised when he heard this. He didn't expect Meng Yueheng to sense the extent of his cultivation with just a glance. It must be said that this is really amazing. You did well in the outer sect ranking battle this time, so what are your plans next? Looking at Bai Fei, Meng Yueheng asked. Meng Yueheng's inquiry made Bai Fei answer directly, "I plan to take the assessment task of the inner sect disciples." There was no surprise on Meng Yueheng's old face. He nodded and said, "With your current strength, it is more than enough to participate in the assessment task of the inner sect disciples. After all, if you want to take a step further in your strength, you really need the last few levels of Blood Sword 10,000 formulas." At that moment, Meng Yueheng raised his palm and flicked it gently, and then a token flew in front of Bai Fei. Bai Fei stretched out his palm and took the token that Meng Yueheng threw over. "You take this token to accept the assessment task of the inner disciples. I believe they should not make it too difficult for you," Meng Yueheng said lightly. Meng Yueheng's words made Bai Fei slightly startled, but he soon understood what the former meant by this sentence. Now Bai Fei most urgently needs the cultivation method behind Blood Sword 10,000 formulas, but he can only obtain it by becoming an inner disciple. However, the assessment tasks of inner disciples are difficult and easy. If you encounter a more difficult assessment task, it will take a lot of time. Therefore, Meng Yueheng gave the token to Bai Fei just to shorten this time. It is equivalent to letting Bai Fei go through the motions. After all, with Meng Yueheng's token, the assessment tasks of inner disciples have never been too difficult, unless he does not want to enter the 9-story tower to break through. Meng Yueheng is the elder guarding the 9-layer pass tower, whether it is an outer or inner sect disciple. As long as they want to hone themselves and improve their strength without risking their lives, the 9-layer pass tower is their best choice. Chapter 79 Jade Slip. You are listening at novelfull.audio. So basically, no one would be willing to offend Meng Yueheng. After all, the gatekeeper elders may not have much power, but they control a large place for cultivation, which is the main destination for the disciples of the Blood Sword sect. After knowing Meng Yueheng's thoughts, Bai Fei nodded gently to Meng Yueheng and said, "I understand. Also, how did you study the black box before?" At this time, Meng Yueheng asked about another matter. When he heard Meng Yueheng mention the black box, Bai Fei's face showed a look of astonishment, his eyes were a little confused, and he even subconsciously thought in his heart, "Black box? What black box?" Soon, he reacted. What Meng Yueheng said should be the black box that he got as a reward from the sect after passing the 9 levels. When Meng Yueheng saw a look of confusion on Bai Fei's face, he knew that he might have forgotten the existence of the black box. This made Meng Yueheng's old face look speechless, but he knew very well in his heart that it would take a certain amount of energy to open the black box. As far as the recent situation is concerned, Bai Fei really doesn't have the time, Meng Yueheng said at the moment. There are very valuable things in the black box. If you have time later, focus on opening it. Meng Yueheng still revealed some things to let Bai Fei understand the importance of the black box. Hearing Meng Yueheng's words, Bai Fei's eyebrows slightly raised, and there was a touch of surprise on his handsome face. He really didn't expect Meng Yueheng to say such a thing. Obviously, Meng Yueheng should know what is in the black box, so, Bai Fei asked, "Master, what is in the black box?" Meng Yueheng did not answer directly, but just shook his head. "You will know when you can open it." Seeing that Meng Yueheng was unwilling to say, Bai Fei could only curl his lips, but he still kept this matter in mind. The black box that Meng Yueheng attached so much importance to must be something extraordinary. Meng Yueheng did not say much about the black box, but raised his palm, and then a faint light burst out, and a jade slip appeared on the palm of his hand. Meng Yueheng handed it to Bai Fei and said, "This is for you." "What is this?" Seeing this, Bai Fei stretched out his hand and took it. "This is the martial arts I practiced." "You practice well. If you don't understand anything, you can ask me." Meng Yueheng said lightly. When Bai Fei heard this, a look of surprise appeared on his face. He was a little unexpected. After all, Meng Yueheng said at the beginning that he would not teach him anything. As a result, he is willing to teach me now. This is different from what he said at the beginning. However, no matter what, Meng Yueheng is willing to teach me, which is a good thing for Bai Fei. So, Bai Fei bowed to Meng Yueheng and said, "Thank you, master. Go away." Meng Yueheng waved his hand and ordered him to leave. Hearing this, Bai Fei said goodbye to Meng Yueheng without saying anything. Meng Yueheng looked at Bai Fei's leaving figure, his eyes revealed a deep color, and whispered softly, "I hope the things on the jade slip are really useful to you." After Bai Fei left Meng Yueheng's room, he also used his mind to perceive the things recorded on the jade slip. When Bai Fei perceived it, a look of shock appeared on his face, because there are many martial arts recorded on the jade slip. One of the martial arts is Blood Sword 10,000 Secrets. The Blood Sword 10,000 Secrets on it is the real complete version. Not only the 6th to 9th levels that only inner disciples can practice, but even the 10th level that only Sword Pavilion disciples are qualified to practice is also available. This really shocked Bai Fei. The rules of the Blood Sword sect are strict. Only after becoming a specific disciple can one be qualified to enjoy the practice method behind Blood Sword 10,000 Ju, otherwise, once discovered, he will definitely be severely punished. But now Meng Yueheng directly taught him, which is a big risk. Once discovered, he will be punished by the sect. This touched Bai Fei's heart. Of course, Bai Fei also understood that he was about to perform the assessment task of becoming an inner disciple. As long as he became an inner disciple, he would be qualified to practice the practice method behind Blood Sword 10,000 Ju, so it didn't matter if it was given to him early now. At most, it was just early practice, but no matter what, this thought was very touching to Bai Fei. In addition to Blood Sword 10,000 Ju, there are other martial arts. There are 3 martial arts in total. A boxing technique, a body technique, a sword technique. The grades of these 3 martial arts are all 4th grade Earth grade. This is the first time Bai Fei has come into contact with 4th grade martial arts, and they are all Earth grade martial arts. 4th grade martial arts are very powerful. After all, the martial arts that can be touched in the entire Blood Sword sect are only 5th grade mysterious grade. But Meng Yueheng used 3 4th grade Earth level martial arts at the first move. It can be seen how generous Meng Yueheng is. This made Bai Fei eager to practice, because the 3 martial arts given by Meng Yueheng are really suitable for Bai Fei now. Except for one soul technique, Bai Fei now has low-grade martial arts. For Bai Fei now, it is difficult to keep up with his fighting intensity. However, the 3 martial arts given by Meng Yueheng can greatly improve Bai Fei's fighting power. These 3 martial arts are simply tailor-made for Bai Fei. This made Bai Fei feel warm in his heart. This old man is not bad. Bai Fei smiled and left the cave to go to the core hall to receive the assessment task of the inner disciples. The core hall is responsible for the assessment tasks of the inner disciples. When Bai Fei appeared at the gate of the core hall, he happened to meet someone. That person was Huang Jie. Junior brother Bai Fei. Seeing Bai Fei appear, Huang Jie's beautiful face showed a hint of surprise, and then she whispered, "Why are you here?" Bai Fei was also startled when he saw Huang Jie, but then he came back to his senses and said with a smile, "Senior sister Jade. Are you here to receive the assessment task for entering the inner gate?" Chapter 80 Assessment Task. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Looking at Bai Fei, Huang Jie asked softly. Bai Fei nodded immediately after hearing this and said, "That's right." Looking at senior sister Jade's posture, it seems that she is also planning to take the assessment task of the inner disciples. Huang Jie did not deny it, nodded lightly, and at the same time said, "It is indeed the case, but you are also going to take the assessment task of the inner disciples." "Yes, what's wrong?" Seeing that Huang Jie seemed very surprised, Bai Fei said in confusion. Are you not going to stay in the outer sect? That looking at Bai Fei, Huang Jie said softly, you have just got the first place in the outer sect, and you can enjoy a lot of treatment. If you become an inner sect disciple, then you will not be able to enjoy those resources and treatment. Indeed, the reason why the ranking of the outer sect ranking battle is so important is that it can enjoy a lot of treatment and resources. Just like the salary, it is more generous than that of ordinary outer sect disciples, especially the higher the ranking, the more you get. It can also save a lot of work, so that you have more time to practice. This is the reason why all the outer disciples are trying so hard to squeeze into the outer gate ranking list, but once you become an inner disciple, all the treatment and resources you enjoy in the outer gate will be taken back. After all, the outer gate and the inner gate belong to two different areas. This is also the reason why many of the top 10 outer gate geniuses such as Lu Liwen will stay in the outer gate and are unwilling to leave the inner gate. But for Bai Fei, cultivation resources are not too important. After all, he has a system. As long as he completes the system's tasks and gets points, he can exchange what he wants from the system. All what he lacks now is actually just an identity. An identity that can make him unable to be bound. Therefore, after hearing Huang Jie's words, Bai Fei just smiled and said, I know, but this is not important to me. Hearing what Bai Fei said, Huang Jie's eyes became a little strange. It's not important, then you are still working so hard to grab the first place in the outer gate ranking battle. Of course, this was just Bai Fei's choice, and Huang Jie naturally did not interfere much. In that case, let's go in together. Okay. After the two entered the core hall, they heard a noise. How could there be no assessment tasks suitable for us? Stop making trouble. That's right. Are you targeting us on purpose? Bai Fei and Huang Jie looked at each other after hearing these contents, and then walked over. Then, Bai Fei found that two outer disciples were arguing with the disciples of the core hall. Bai Fei still remembered these two outer disciples. It was Wang Tianfang who met in the previous outer ranking battle, and Lu Dafu who Wang Tianfang challenged later. Bai Fei did not expect that these two people would come together to receive the assessment tasks of the inner disciples. Seeing Wang Tianfang about to take action, the inner core hall disciple smiled bitterly and said, Brother, there is really no suitable assessment task now. If there is a suitable one, I will definitely give it to you. Wang Tianfang was displeased when he heard this. At this time, he also saw Bai Fei and Huang Jie, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. Oh, Brother Bai Fei, Sister Jie, why are you here too? Lu Dafu also smiled at Huang Jie and said, Sister Jie. Then, Lu Dafu nodded to Bai Fei, as a greeting. Junior Brother Tianfang, Junior Brother Dafu. Huang Jie nodded calmly, and then asked, what happened? Senior Sister Jie, please judge. The core hall said that there is no assessment task suitable for us now, and we have to wait for a while before we can apply. What a joke. Such a big core hall actually has no assessment tasks. Isn't this just funny? Hearing Huang Jie's question, Wang Tianfang immediately cursed. Huang Jie looked at the disciples of the core hall. A bitter smile appeared on the face of the disciples of the core hall. He bowed to Huang Jie, and said, Senior Sister Jie. It's not that there are no assessment tasks, but these assessment tasks are indeed not suitable for these two brothers. Bullshit. There is no such thing as suitable or unsuitable assessment tasks. Can't we just let us choose? Wang Tianfang cursed. Senior Brother Tianfang, you know, this is not in line with the rules. The disciple of the core hall shook his head and said, I remember that there should be team tasks for the assessment tasks of the inner disciples, right? At this time, Bai Fei's eyes fell on the inner core hall disciples and whispered, I wonder if there are such tasks. Yes, there are, but for the current assessment tasks, there are some requirements for the number of people and cultivation. The inner core hall disciple heard this and hesitated for a moment before saying this. He was well known for Bai Fei's name and did not dare to be careless. Then this senior brother, could you please tell me which tasks we can do together? Bai Fei looked at the disciples of the inner core hall and said again. Junior Brother Bai Fei, you know, this is against the rules. The disciple of the Colonel Hall said with a frown. When Bai Fei heard this, he just smiled slightly. Senior brother, we just want to know if there is a suitable task that we can do together. After all, you have made so many of us return without success. If word spreads, it will not be good for the Colonel Palace. All right? While saying this, Bai Fei took out Meng Yueheng's token. At the same time, he also handed out a bag of spiritual stones to the disciples of the inner core hall. When the disciples of the Colonel Hall saw the elder token in Bai Fei's hand, their expressions changed first, and then when they saw the bag of spirit stones given by Bai Fei, their eyes narrowed involuntarily. At that moment, he accepted the bag of spirit stones handed over by Bai Fei without any trace, and then he pretended to sigh. And said, "Seeing as we are all from the same school, let me help you see if there are any appropriate group assessment task." Hearing the words of the disciples of the Colonel Hall, Bai Fei smiled lightly. "Thank you very much, senior brother." Seeing Bai Fei's behavior, Huang Jie, Wang Tianfang and Lu Dafu all looked a little weird. They really didn't expect that Bai Fei would be so understanding of the world.